So I was just saying to myself, and I'm like, I should be recording this. But I was just saying to myself that I don't know where the conversation with myself came about, but I'm like thinking to myself, I. Oh, that's what I was saying. Okay, so y'all know the movie Drop Dead Fred. A little bit about this movie, right? It's about this girl who, when she was younger, her parents, I think they went to through a divorce or something, and she just felt really lonely, and so she had this imaginary friend who she called Drop Dead Fred. He was an older, like, was he British man with red hair, and he just kept her company and kept her feeling safe, but he was very, very bad. Like, he was very mischievous and got her into all this trouble. And so she grew up as this very soft hearted, loving, woman who was still being sort of taken advantage of, and he came back in her life, right? And so I connect to that movie a lot because I was just say this, like, recently I have been connecting back to myself, and I realized, like, Fred is leaving me. So what I'm saying is, like, I created a sort of cloak of thorns to, like, keep myself safe for a very long time, because I am so vulnerable and so soft. And I come from a neighborhood, I come from a black neighborhood, and I love being black. I'm very black. I love black culture. I am the artist of the Black Renaissance, right? I'm the one telling everybody, we in the Black Renaissance. Um, and yet I constantly say that it's hard, or at least for me, growing up black. It was hard being black. I know people automatically go to, like, a lot of times people talk about being gay, but people don't say, like, it's hard being black, because the idea of where I come from and being black was, like, especially being a guy, was that you have to be extra hard. And I'm from New York. You got to be extra hard. You got to be extra tough. And I'm not a drug dealer. I'm not a gangster. I'm not a killer. I'm not a thief. And I can't knock that. Like, I constantly love singing that Can't Knock the Hustle with Mary and Jay, because that was the immediate understanding of wealth for me and entrepreneurship, hustlers, that gangster energy. But I have to be honest with myself, which is my connection to the men at Earn Your Leisure, and Tyler the Creator, and Pharrell Williams, and Ye. Like, because they have this sort of nerdy, and I also spoke about Smart Guy. They have this nerdy energy about them that was so disqualified. Like, that energy was like, you can't be that and be black. Maybe you could be that and be Mexican a little bit, but you can't be that and be black, and have brown skin and be and give all that. And it just was extremely challenging for me to be just a pure boy. Be a pure little black boy growing up in the hood in this black community that was constantly sort of bullying me and chastising me for being a gay spirited child. Before I was even understanding, like, sex and the beauty of sex and my connection to sex. I was given all these titles like a fucking NASCAR, car with all these fucking stickers on it. And I'm like, what? And so, yeah, it's just to be decluttering myself from, like, the energy of having to save myself, having to keep myself safe with going to school and taking the train alone, and just growing up in environments where, like, I gravitated to films like Boys in the Hood, Men's Society. Those are my babysitters. And I gravitated to them because in artists like Mary J. Blige, because they showed me like, oh, what you are living in can be dramatized and elevated in a glamorous sort of way and tells and be sort of this thing of art, and you can tell stories with it and you can create happy endings. What my love for Mary J. Blige was that she reminded me of myself. She reminded me of the women around me, and she did something with her emotions, and she was glamorous and she was beautiful. She is glamorous, she is beautiful. And it was like, oh wow, you don't have to just sit in it. You can move it, you can sing it out, you can make it out, you can story it out. Same thing with those films. And I say that because I grew up in the 90s in New York, and I've lived behind this bravado of like, I'm from Brooklyn, nigga, which is a part of it, part of who I am, but it's not really. The truth is, I have a song called I Come From the Ghetto. The truth is, it was really fucking painful, okay? I feel a lot of shit, and I would have to go to school in like kindergarten, and we would have fucking moments of silence because of kids getting fucking shot and shit. It's like, that's my friend, and you see these kids who are being abused, and you hear these stories, and there was always somebody in my class that, like, my classes in schools were like always, especially in elementary school, they were always like overcrowded, like over 30 kids. And there was always these kids that would come into the class, and they would like be foster kids. And so they would come for like a week or something until they got placed in something more permanent. And I would just get so attached, and you would see them, and you would just see them going through it. And I would just be like, oh my God, So, and that whole Brenda's having a baby, that was real. And I was doing fucking current events every week and having to read the daily news and seeing like these young black girls, young women, not even all black women, not even all black girls, just young girls having babies and like stuffing them in spaces. And, that's where the whole, you can leave your child at the fire department came, like just all of this crazy shit and gunshots. And it's like, like you watch movies and like you would hear the kids say, is that a gunshot or is that firework? Or they know the gun, like that shit is real. Okay. And then I did grow up knowing that I loved men, knowing that as a boy, knowing that I like boys, in the way that was very true to me. And I always knew it was never something that I know a lot of people find out very, very late. I always knew. It was just as pure as I was. It was something that I just always knew. And all my first crushes were, as a boy, were beautiful boys. So, it was always, it always was. But I was getting all this energy from everybody that who I wasn't good. Not because I was a boy. I wasn't saying I had a boyfriend. It was that I was effeminate. It was that I was creative. It was that I was quiet. It was that I wasn't like a thug. I wasn't hard. And I would always look at like the boys that were bad, and I'd be like, Mommy, I want to look like him. I want to look like him. I want to look like him. And so that is, I do say this a lot too. I say my dream is to look like a 90s, 80s drug dealer, 70s pimp, and mix it up. And that is a very true expression of my personality externally. But I am really just this sort of like brainhead, like this creative brainhead thinker. I'm very empathetic. I love very deeply. It is not hard for me to sense somebody's intent. And it's also not hard for me to cry. And just this very sort of like pure being walking around in New York City trying not to get my feelings hurt. And I just was thinking like, I don't believe that a lot of gangsters, a lot of the guys that are notorious in our hoods are killers or sort of as ruthless as we've allowed ourselves to believe they are. And they have allowed themselves to believe they are. There is a guy who used to sell drugs in my neighborhood, and he always had this integrity and this desire, I would say, to help the boys. He was doing so bad, he would have all these younger boys selling drugs for him. And I would hear, but you could hear and feel that there was something there where he wanted to do good. And he would be like, because I don't let nobody work for me unless they show me their report card. Like it was something sincere about him, but it was so complex. And I used to be so mad at him because I'm like, if you think like that, you shouldn't even be doing this shit, And a little kid. I was a little kid, and I saw him a few years ago, and he had these I can cry. He had these like kids, like he was like a counselor or something, and they were coming out of the Barclays, and I was like, oh wow, dreams come true, So I guess I don't really I don't have a point in saying this other than I feel like being black for me, being a black boy coming out of the urban setting that is the ghetto. Sometimes I can't even say I'm from the ghetto. Like I don't feel like I have that right to say that because I am it. I'm not like the other guys that like, oh, he a hood nigga, he a street nigga. I'm not like that. So I always felt because of who I was, I didn't have a right to say that I'm from this experience, and also how I see. I come from St. John's in Washington, and I grew up in the 90s where you had the height of the Labor Day Parade, the Caribbean Day Parade. It would come through my block. You can get pieces of the people's costumes. They sometimes were very generous with giving you their costumes. I've seen I grew up going in the back of the Brooklyn Museum for the kiddie carnivals every year. I grew up next to the Brooklyn Museum. Whenever I would tell people where I lived in more like corporate spaces, they were always, oh, Tom's. Tom's the like infamous Brooklyn, little high-end restaurant, bougie, but we knew Gus. His father was Tom. He left him the restaurant, and Gus was kind of shady and sassy. And so there was this melting pot, but I also grew up around a lot of black ownership. And so I seen a lot of stuff, and I never felt like it was as bad, but I also felt like I didn't deserve to be a part of my neighborhood, which is why I held back. If y'all don't know, my name is Eric Arthur Prophet, the Black Renaissance, the artistic director of hip hop, the artist's artist, the professional muse, the cultural curator in this Black Renaissance. And I didn't feel I felt that when I grew up, that if I gravitated toward my truth, and at the time, I just thought my truth was that I love men, that I would be exiled. But what I felt my truth was is what I know now, and is that I'm a fucking nerd. I'm a nerd. I'm an artist. I'm more connected to myself. I like being with myself. I don't need a big crew. Like growing up, everybody, we rolling deep. And I didn't need to roll deep. I had to learn that. So I always feel kind of hesitant in saying, like, I'm from the hood because the environment was so collective. But that's New York. But I also feel like there are people that come from the projects, the housing projects. I didn't grow up in the housing projects, but I grew up going to the housing projects a lot, friends and family. And it was like some of the most fun I've ever had. But you go to these spaces and they're really like their own islands. And a lot of people don't leave their boroughs. I was lucky to have a mother and an aunt that worked in Manhattan. And so I got to take the train a lot. And my aunt lived in the Bronx. She lived in Harlem, Spanish Harlem. So I got to see different parts of the city. And a lot of my friends didn't leave the neighborhood. They didn't leave the block. And so I felt very privileged at the same time, but at the same time hesitant of like cultivating my understanding of what I experienced growing up and being this artist, being this cultivator, being the artistic director of hip hop. I was so hesitant in saying that because I felt that there was a disconnect from me being a gay spirit, being a pure person. But then I come full circle where I'm like, I don't believe that any of those people, I do believe that you can be an asshole and you just like being in the darkness and playing bad. And that's some people's natural sort of being. But I don't feel that a lot of those young men and women are any different than me right now. And that's the bottom line. That's what I'm trying to say. I think a lot of us are really pure and we're just surviving. And it's time to drop dead, Fred, and be yourself.